Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hollywood, Cleopatra, politics, death, and more news on today's show. Wow, it's going to be very eclectic today. We're going to be reaching here and there because there is so much news going on, not just in Israel, but around the world. Yesterday, as I'm doing the show, I should say Monday, Saeb Erekat, he is a part of the PLO. He was the Secretary General of the Executive Committee of the PLO, died of coronavirus. Now, it's interesting that when he got really sick, where did he go? He didn't go to his great Arab hospitals in the Palestinian Authority. He came to an Israeli hospital to try to get the best care. But he has had a lot of health problems. He had a lung transplant 3 years ago, which weakened his immune system. He had a bacterial infection in addition to the coronavirus, and he succumbed, and that was on Monday. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the new Bahrain deal. Get this, which was just put out and tweeted. I hope I pronounced his name right, Bin Shaiban from the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. He says here, the Jewish hashtag have more humanity than the resistance parties, the Palestinian Authority, and all Palestinian factions. See how they agreed to treat Saeb Erekat, who is their enemy. Everyone must respect the hashtag Israeli people, hashtag Israel, hashtag UAE Israel, hashtag Abraham Accords, hashtag Israel UAE, and hashtag peace. This is phenomenal. You know, when I read things like this, when I see Arabs in headdresses and their beards and their white kaftans and all the things that they're wearing, the whole thing, and I hear them talking positively about Israel, you scratch your head. What can I say? You scratch your head. We're in a new era, it seems. All right. A lot of news. Gal Gadot playing Cleopatra. Happy about it or unhappy about it? We're going to talk to you about that as well. You are invited to call in if you have any questions. This is a live show if you're listening on Monday night, midnight to 1 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, or Tuesday morning, Israel time. We'll be right back.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we have a lot of news to talk about. Hollywood, Cleopatra, politics, death, and more. In the beginning of the show, I made an announcement that's, get this, okay? Saeb Erekat, the Secretary General of the Executive Committee of the PLO, has died. And if you go look it up on Google right now, you will find two places that indeed report this. Let me just go here before I introduce the guest. So one of them is the English alarabia.net. Sorry, the C News, and it says here Palestine's veteran negotiator Saeb Erekat dies. This is from 11 hours ago at the taping of the show at this live show here, 11 hours ago. And also on IsraelNationalNews.com, they have a report that says that Ashark TV reports that Saeb Erekat died. However, in other places, you're not going to see this. You'll see things from 17 hours ago, 16 hours ago, that he's in critical condition, that his family has been called to the hospital to say goodbye as his health worsens. So no official announcement there. And let's start on that issue. And let me introduce my guest now. We have joining us Barry Shaw. He is the International Public Diplomacy Director at the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. His books include Fighting Hamas, BDS and Anti-Semitism, BDS for Idiots, and 1917 From Palestine to Israel. They are all available on Amazon or at your Stamatsky bookstore here in Israel. You can visit their website at strategic-israel.org or theviewfromisrael.com. Welcome to the show, Barry Shaw.
Hi, thanks, Tamar, for having me.
All right. So by the time the show gets podcasted, we may indeed have a confirmation. But as we were talking, when we were getting you on the line during the break, we were looking, and there is no other confirmation except for those two that I could see on Google that he actually is dead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this thing sort of got off to a false start, I guess. But, according to my information, that his health has deteriorated. He is in serious condition. And it comes back to the point that Saeb Erekat, who has spent a career decrying Israel, the Zionist state, and not having anything to do with Israel, when he was given a choice of where to go for hospitalization, he decided to come to Israel and to the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. Where the staff are very capable, doctors, nurses, medical staff, both Jewish and Arabs, are doing their best to keep him alive and do their best for him. But things are not looking promising for him.
And here I'm
basically,
go ahead.
One can look at it as a metaphor for the Palestinian Authority, where relationships between Israel and the moderate Arab world are beginning to flourish. The health of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian leadership everywhere is deteriorating. So you could look at it this way, that Saeb Erekat's condition is actually a metaphor for the Palestinian Authority that he represents.
I'm just looking at another headline here. This is from IranPress.com. It says here, Palestinian state television has denied news reports of the death of Saeb Erekat, the Secretary General of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the PLO. His son denies the death reports. Again, I just want to say here to all of our listeners, by the time that the show is podcasted by this evening, Israel time, most likely we will have a statement either way, a more official statement.
That's okay. That's fair enough. I mean, let's not wish death on him, but he's certainly in a bad condition. And I think we Israelis could look more altruistically on this thing. Some people may, for personal or other reasons, wish him gone, but we can say we don't wish ill on anybody, even some of those who actually deny our existence.
Let me read here that the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem said that treating Erekat was a huge challenge because he had undergone a lung transplant 3 years ago, and he had a weakened immune system and a bacterial infection in addition to the coronavirus. So that's the story there. All right, so we have a lot of news stories to cover, and let's go to a tweet that I just read, and maybe you can help me, Barry, because I don't know how to pronounce his name. Bin Shaiban, Shaiban, and he writes here, quote, the Jewish have more humanity than the resistance parties, the Palestinian Authority, and all the Palestinian factions. See how they agreed to treat Saeb Erekat, who is their enemy. Everyone must respect the Israeli people. And he goes on to hashtag the Abraham Accords, the Israel-UAE peace, etc. Very interesting, I was telling our listeners, to see an Arab in the full headdress and saying positive things about Israel. In fact, there was people from the UAE who visited the Temple Mount the other day. Are you familiar with that story? What happened?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell our listeners?
Well, This is one of the blessings of the Abraham Accord, where we have these agreements with the United Arab Emirates and with Bahrain, and we're getting, and what's thrilling us Israelis is we're getting a very refreshing, completely different response from this part of the Arab world, from even the ones that we had before from Jordan and Egypt, which I mentioned on an earlier show. Basically, those agreements were made government to government, but they had no effect on the Arab street in Jordan and in Egypt that still suffer from decades of anti-Semitic indoctrination. Apparently, the further away you go to like the Emirates and Bahrain, you have less of this inbuilt anti-Semitism. People come at us with a fresh perspective. I suppose part of that is that the United Emirates and Bahrain never ever went to war in order against the Jews or to destroy the Jewish state. So they take a different approach. And this approach, we Israelis find, I think you agree with me, Tamar, completely refreshing and quite exciting, because this is something we Israelis have never experienced before. And we can only hope that their viewpoint would prevail over a larger Arab world, including to the Arab League. And it's beginning to show itself, I guess, by the way they perceive Israel now, as opposed to the way they perceived the failed leadership of Palestinians, whether it's the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah or even worse, Hamas in Gaza. And a lot of the Arab world are getting fed up of propping these people up. Give you one example right now. I have a grandson who is in the army, and he's somewhere down in the Gaza border, and this is no secret anymore, but starting from yesterday, and now it's in the news, the army is now on high alert on the Gaza border. I don't know if you covered this, Tamar. The IDF have been beefed up along the Gaza border because Hamas now is demanding more money from Qatar. I mean, it was only about a month ago that they received, what was it, $40 million. But they're demanding more, where Qatar wasn't supposed to give them any more until late January, February. So the presence is being beefed up right now on the Gaza border. Soldiers who were due to leave to go home for a weekend or something like that have to stay there, because Israel has said that we will deal strongly against any acts of violence and terror by Hamas against Israeli citizens in order to pressure Qatar to send them money. But this is part of the Palestinian stance that the Arab world's getting fed up of playing the beggar and the victim by leaders who, quite frankly, even like Saeb Erekat, live a wealthy lifestyle as they keep their people in poverty due to their corrupt rule. And quite frankly, apart from the health issue, Saeb Erekat is a personification of that.
And don't forget, not just victimhood, but extortion. The PLO were the ones that, Yasser Arafat was the one that put in that, pay off or we're going to blow up your airlines. If you don't want us to hijack your planes and blow up your planes, then pay up. That's what they were doing all the time. They're the ones who brought that in. All right. And so go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's another issue I suppose we'll come to a bit later in the show, because I know you want to speak to me, something to do with the American elections and what's going on. But one of the issues that, in my mind, is outstanding, and one of the issues that upsets me so much about the naive American Jewish voter who've always voted Democrat and will continue to vote for Biden, even though one of the things in his policies is he's going to reinstate the payment of U.S. taxpayers' dollars to the Palestinian Authority, despite the fact that the Palestinian Authority still have not relented on their pay-to-slave policy, in which European taxpayers and also American taxpayers give their money through their government to a Palestinian Authority, and a lot of that money gets diverted into a slush fund in order to reward Palestinian terrorists for killing Jewish civilians. And Biden is one of those that intends to appease his radical left-wing base in order to say that he's going to reinstate that payment to the Palestinians, despite the fact that there's no condition, as was opposed by the Taylor Force Act. The Taylor Force Act.
You know what, Barry? We got to stop there because the music's coming on. We're going to a break.
Okay.
And let's just hope that people wake up. There's an organization called Jexit, Jews Exit the Democratic Party. People should check it out, Jexit. Don't go anywhere, everybody. We're going to be back. Feel free to call in with your comments or questions. We have a lot of news to cover on the show today. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Siminto from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together, we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Siminto, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Our guest is Barry Shaw, and we are talking about a lot of different news stories that are happening, not just in Israel, but also around the world. And Barry, when we were going off the last segment, I just briefly mentioned Jexit. That's a new organization, basically, that's popped up of Jews exiting the Democratic Party. That's Jexit. And you wanted to talk about how Jews who are the more secular Jews, because religious Jews in America are voting more, conservative, Trump, Republican, whereas the more secular Jews are voting Democrat because that's their religion. Be good and try to be good to everybody, the poor, the downtrodden, without having the knowledge of when to be giving and when to demand from people that you have to get up on your own 2 feet, etc. But where would you like to start with the whole elections and the Democratic Party and American Jews?
Yeah, there's a strange dichotomy here, because if you ask Israelis, American Israelis over here, about 70%, if they were able to vote in the American election, would vote for Trump. About 27% for Biden. And it's completely reverse if you ask American Jews. About 68% are going to vote, they say, for Biden, and less than 30% for Trump, which is strange, because when you base, for instance, what President Trump has done in just over 3 years, not only for Israel, but basically for American Jews, because right after President, and this is a strange thing that gets me, and maybe some of your American Jewish listeners could answer this. Right after President Trump signed an executive order making it illegal to apply anti-Semitism on campuses in order to protect the Jewish students who were being hounded by the anti-Semites there, the Democrat Jewish Council of America launched their 2020 campaign, and they portrayed Trump as the greatest threat to American Jews in history, which flew in the face of what he was actually doing to protect American Jewish youth on campuses. And then just before the presidential debate, the Democratic Jewish Council of America came out with a slogan comparing Trump to Hitler. One begins to wonder, what the heck is going on there in America? And in my opinion, Jews have never reached such a low point in Jewish history as the American Jewish Democrats have done this year. And when a national Jewish organization stoops to recruiting Nazi imagery against their own president, a president that has stood so boldly with Israel and is protecting Jewish students on campus, you have to ask what's going on there. It's absolutely crazy. Something serious, perhaps irreparably, is wrong with American Jews. And quite frankly, I think they should be hanging their heads in shame. And quite frankly, they're so much into Black Lives Matter, they've forgotten that Jewish lives matter as well. And it's
all
Black
lives matter.
Sorry?
All lives matter.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's Black Lives Matter that are attacking Jews. It's the Black Lives Matter who are threatening Jewish values of faith and family in their Marxist manifesto. You can go to that and actually read it. And the aim that they will impose when Biden gets into power, it's the Black Lives Matter that are destroying Jewish stores and businesses and desecrating synagogues in places like Los Angeles. And yet American Jews who think themselves woke have less than 2 weeks to wake up and find their moral compass, in my opinion.
Right. Well, it's just a repeat of history all the time. Jews, they go to their host countries and they want to be more patriotic than the regular, civilian over there, and they want to show, look, we're patriotic, we love the country, because they get comfortable and they don't want to have to be thrown out or suspected that the Jews this, the Jews that, and they are, and so they do become like this. It's just a pattern of history. But
okay. You could say that for some reason, some unknown reason, that the American Jews seem to be detached from reality when it comes to actually a president that's looking after their personal safety as well as championing in Israel. But you wondered what you would have thought that they would be concerned about their own economic situation. And I can give you listeners a couple of statistics. After 8 years of Obama-Biden, the median household income in America had grown just over $1,000 to $1,043. And in just 3 years under Trump, this number had shot up to $5,240, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Nothing to do with the Trump campaign. In other words, Trump had improved the household median income by five times in the 3 years, based on as opposed to the 8 years of Obama-Biden. And anybody who knows about the Biden economic plan, according to the Hoover Institute, it will reduce the middle-class household income by $6,500. And they also found that the Biden economic plan will reduce jobs and shrink the economy. So one would have thought that, if they're thinking about their own pocket, they would go for a president who has proven himself capable of handling the economy far better than a guy who's been 47 years in the Senate in power and has done nothing for the American people but apart from enriching himself. So I
you know what? From there, let's go. Let's segue. This is good. This is a good segue into the whole scandal now about Hunter Biden's laptop. So why don't we go there right now?
Well, this is the Americans have been hounding Trump over false allegations of Russian collusion and impeachment, over a phone call to the Ukrainian president, on all sorts of made-up stories. They spent 3 years and $40 million investigating a non-existent Russian collusion. And yet, when the New York Post, a reputable newspaper, exposes this bombshell report of around Hunter Biden's laptop, they say it's fiction, it's all made up, etc., etc. So let me just give you some basic information here, if you don't understand what. Hunter Biden sent his laptop to be fixed at a shop in Delaware, and the contract had a condition that if the laptop is not collected in 9 weeks, it becomes the possession of the merchant. Now, I don't know whether Hunter Biden is high on weed or whatever, but however, he didn't turn up for the laptop, and it became the possession of the merchant, and he failed to collect it and didn't respond to phone calls. And this was at the time of a Trump impeachment around November, December 2019, and the merchant got nervous. He knew that the Bidens were powerful people, so he took a look at the hard drive, and it found it full of serious stuff. So what did he do? He contacted the FBI, who took a copy of the contents and told him to keep his mouth shut. And the FBI didn't do anything about it. And this made him even more nervous. So he sent out emails to certain members of Congress, and one of them contacted Rudy Giuliani and Giuliani's lawyer. And Giuliani and his lawyer decided that the lawyer should go visit the merchant to check him out. I mean, basically, after all, he could be a nutcase or somebody looking for bribe somebody or fame or profit, or maybe it was all made up. So the lawyer went over to Delaware and spent a couple of days with him and discovered that the guy was serious, and he looked at the contents of the hard drive and found them very serious indeed. And the merchant wanted it taken off his hands because he was scared. So they made a deal with him, and the lawyer brought the laptop back to Giuliani. Now, this is where it gets a little bit personal for me, Tamar. They needed to verify for certain that the laptop really did belong to Hunter Biden. And this is the point, because the media, the left-wing media, the Democrat-supporting media, is saying, no, it's all made up. So they brought in an artificial intelligence expert to check out the laptop and the hard drive for authenticity. Now, this AI guy happens to be a New York-based Israeli who I've been in contact with in the past over several issues. He has, for instance, provided me with corroborated evidence of Ilhan Omar's lies, including clear evidence that one of the people she married was her gay brother from London. You may remember this from past. It's sort of been forgotten now. And a lot more interesting stuff on her and her family going back to Somalia.
All right, Barry, can I interrupt you here just because we have a caller that's been waiting for a while, and we're almost at the end of the segment. So let's bring on the caller. We have Michael from Vancouver. Michael, maybe you can just briefly ask your question, and then if we can't answer it in this side of the segment, we'll do it on the next.
Sounds good. Shalom, Tamar. I just wanted to make a statement, see what you thought, and I guess America has never really, America has a history of backstabbing us. They even did an arms embargo on Israel in 1948 in the War of Independence. And America has always funded our worst enemies as well as helping us. So how do we really trust America? And don't you think that this new peace deals, the conditions that they're putting on us is just a continuation of Bush's plans, Oslo, and Clinton's plans and all of that? Isn't it the same thing, a creation of a Palestinian state within Israel? How can we trust them? That's my question.
Okay, very good question as well. Barry, do you want to take this right now?
Yeah, okay. Well, Israel isn't actually naive on this. We've had plenty of experience, including bitter experience. But we know how to take the best advantage of an opportunity given to us. Regarding the deal we have with the United Emirates, Bahrain, and probably others, I think the next one is going to be Sudan. I've read something that things are going on between the United States and Sudan, which is going to ease them into an agreement with Israel. But these are normalization. They're called normalization.
Okay. We got to hold it there. We'll be right back, everybody. Don't go anywhere.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. We're talking about a lot of different headlines that are going on right now, not just in Israel, but around the world. Our guest is Barry Shaw. And in the last segment, we had Michael, who called in from Canada. And he was asking about, can we trust the America in negotiating peace deals? And there's a famous expression in Hebrew, kabdehu v'chashdehu, respect him but suspect him. And I think it's great. But, when there's different leaderships, and different leaderships can change the flavor of a country. And with Donald Trump, who I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that he has been a very good thing for Israel in most things, not all, but in most things, that we can be very positive about seeing a lot of these countries coming and wanting to have relations with Israel. But I'll let you finish up the question, Barry.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to tell Michael as well that the fact that a lot of this will depend on, this is why the U.S. election is so important to us, because as long as Trump stays in power, he will remain strong on Israel and supporting Israel, which we need because we and the Arabs who are now making peace with us have one united enemy, and that is not the Palestinians. They're just a nuisance. It's Iran. And certainly one of the things that Biden will do if he gets into power, and he said it, he's going to reopen negotiations with Iran and carry on as if nothing had happened in the meantime. Which is, again, dangerous for Israel. In my opinion, it's also dangerous for America as well. So we're happy with the arrangements with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And I think this was summed up by what Tamar told you, I think, earlier on, that we had the first plane arrive from the United Arab Emirates, and the Emiratis on the plane went to visit Jerusalem, and they went up on the Temple Mount to visit the mosque. And when they were in Jerusalem, they were greeted with love and kisses, basically, by the Jewish Israelis. But when they went onto the Temple Mount, they were spat at and cursed at by the Palestinian Arabs. So they will be going back home and talk about, publicly, the reception that they got. So this strengthens the fact that they made the peace with us, and it actually confirms what they thought from long distance about the Palestinians themselves, which is basically in our favor.
All right. So you wanted, I know, also to finish up about the Hunter Biden scandal. Yeah.
What I wanted to inform your listeners, and I came on this personal thing with this friend of mine, the AI guy in New York who's involved in this, is that he did identify the laptop and the hard drive as absolutely belonging to Hunter Biden. And he's involved also in identifying and verifying the material in there. There's the documents and the emails and the photographs, and he's an expert, as I've seen from personal experience with him, in facial recognition techniques. And he uses this stuff professionally on a lot of stuff. But I want to tell you, the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop, is not only full of absolute bombshell things which implicates Joe Biden, potentially the next president of the United States, heading a corrupt family and getting 50% of the income of his family members, not directly into his account. But one has to question, how does he get so wealthy and have so many houses? Some of his mansions are bigger than warehouses from a Senate salary. But the laptop is full of salacious stuff, porno. And the FBI, by the way, have appointed an agent who works on pedophilia cases to check some of the contents of Hunter Biden's hard drive. So you can see how embarrassing this is. Now, this isn't a secret. It's been covered in two of Peter Schweitzer's books, which you can buy on Amazon, Profiling Corruptions and Secret Empire. But what's strange is that it's not only dependent on Hunter Biden's laptop, because after they've denied that this laptop was Hunter Biden's lawyer actually reached out to Rudy Giuliani asking for the laptop they said didn't belong to them to be returned to them. But there's another turn, that another person, a guy called Devin Cooney, who used to be Hunter Biden's business partner. He's sitting in jail right now after being convicted of serious business crimes, including fraud, and he is fuming because he's in jail and Hunter Biden is getting away scot-free. So when this story broke, he contacted Peter Schweitzer, who visited in prison, and Devin Cooney gave Schweitzer access to his computer, which Schweitzer says is full of tens of thousands of implicating emails, documents, photographs connected to all Hunter Biden's business dealings between him and Devon Archer, and leads back to Joe Biden. So basically, anybody who tells you, well, this Hunter Biden laptop wasn't his and all the things his fault and it's Russian involvement with Trump, bullshit, basically, because there's a second laptop that now is in the hands of Schweitzer, who my guy is also going through for corroborating and verifying the material. So the next potential president of the United States is on a hook here for deep personal financial corruption. And this should be a major issue in the 2 weeks to go before the election. But the mainstream media and the social media, Facebook and Twitter, are blocking it. Not only are they blocking any access to the New York Post reports, but anybody else who puts on material. And they've even blocked the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany's Twitter page as well, which is strange. And you have to ask yourself, what the heck is going on in America here? They protected Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. They're protecting Biden for worse cries, of which there is now clear evidence right now, 2 weeks to go before the presidential election. It's deeply worrying.
All right, we only have about 4 minutes left. I want to cover two other stories very quickly, and that is Hollywood is all a tumble right now. Gal Gadot is supposed to be starring in a movie on Cleopatra. Tell us about that.
Oh, this is all part of the culture cancel mob, that they decided that when they heard that this Israeli Jewish actress was tapped to play Cleopatra in the reworking of the movie, they really went after her, saying, that you should pick a black person because Cleopatra was an African queen, whatever. But, people who know the stuff know that actually Cleopatra was a European. She was a Serbian, and what was the other part of her identity? Greek, right? And actually, there was a survey made by an Arab news outlet in the Middle East, and 60% of the Arab respondents asked, do you think that Gal Gadot would be suitable to play the role of Cleopatra? 60% of the Middle East Arabs said yes, she would be perfect, because they seem to know more about Cleopatra than the so-called cancel culture mob in Hollywood and America. It's ridiculous.
Barry, you know what this reminds me of? Where the Arabs are saying, yeah, it's factually right, and Hollywood's screaming because they're so into their liberalism and woke.
Exactly. It's another example to the American Jewish woke and progressive people to get your head out of the sand.
It's not just the Jews. It's just the liberals.
Everything.
Period.
It's the general atmosphere.
But let me tell you, Barry, this reminds me of, I watched a series on Netflix called Black Crows, and I urge everybody who's interested in what's going on in the Arab world, or what was just until recently with the ISIS, to watch it, because a program like that could never have been made in Hollywood, because they showed exactly how disgusting and terrible ISIS was and Islam was in the way that they practice it. Hollywood would never make a movie like that because it's not politically correct. They would be too afraid to, and it would go against their religion of liberalism to do something like that. But the Arabs who live with it and know about it and can't stand it, they were able to do it, and they were not afraid to do it. So Black Crows on Netflix. Anybody wants to watch that, there's subtitles in English. All right, last minute that we have. You brought up a topic of Israel. We may be going to new elections at some time in the next several months as well. And now they're talking about a government without the Likud. Very quickly.
Yeah, well, there was a couple of TV polls this last week, Tamar, and the numbers were quite strange. because Likud had dropped down to a number of 27, and Naftali Bennett's new right had gone up to 24. So basically, there are only 3 seats behind Likud. One of the things is that Lapid also had grown to 21, and Benny Gantz, who's supposed to be the replacement prime minister in the unity government, his party's dropped to 8. So if you put the numbers together, you end up with a potential government in after a new election, which will be the first government for decades without the Likud. Because if you put together Bennett's new right, blue and white, Lapid's party, Yesh Atid, and Lieberman's party, Israel Beitenu, they would get 61, a majority is 61. You get over 60, you've got a majority.
Yes, you can form a government.
If you take the Likud with United Torah and Shas with the current numbers, they only come to 43. So we could end up with if there was an election. And some people have been hinting recently that actually Bibi is trying to finagle things with the unity government to force an election. Obviously, clearly, this is not so, because according to the statistics, we may end up with a government without the Likud.
Well, we will keep our finger on the pulse of the news and what's happening there. Barry Shaw, thank you so much for being with us here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Thank you, Tamar, for having me. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone, for being with us.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.